You're now listening to the Something Good Podcast Network. Please press any key to continue.
A kiss, as defined by Dan Webster, is something pleasing, a caress, a gentle touch. But there's another kiss that isn't in Webster's.
Hey world, we're kids!
Some critics say they don't make music, they just make noise.
Yeah, Kiss sucks!
Kiss implies the extreme in the theatrics on stage, utilizing fire and smoke and bizarre costumes, and the ever-consistent, constant concealment of their true identities.
Speaking of which, Kiss is going to have its own comic book soon.
Take Kiss with you. It's fun. Show your friends and be the first. Now.
Oh my God, no time to turn!
And welcome once again to No Time to Turn, a Kiss Nerd podcast.
Nerds.
Joining me as always is Cap and Alex from the Something Good Network.
What's going on?
Yo.
And we are tracking the history of Kiss album by album, year by year. I guess now we're, as we've been saying, we're kind of into cycles.
Cycle by cycle.
Right.
And
Although it's kind of getting yearly right now.
Yeah, because we're starting basically at the beginning of 96 here. Mm-hmm. And we just came out of the Unplugged and reunion, I guess, for lack of a better.
And how much of a success the Unplugged, air date was, too, or at least the reception.
The reception to it was really strong.
Oh, yeah.
And so 1996 is starting out not with a flurry of activity, but really with a blizzard. Mm-hmm. There's a lot going on. So some of this timeline we're probably going to be squirrely on because I really couldn't figure out a lot of information on it because there's just so much happening all at once.
Right. You've got a record being made and then big plans for a big tour coming down the pike too.
And it's like they're playing both sides of the coin right now.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too because like you kind of see them kind of dancing with lawyers and other like folks of that ilk too as they're trying to get this set up. We'll probably break that down here and there.
Well, after Unplugged, everyone kind of essentially goes their separate ways in as much as Kiss goes into the studio to record a new album. Ace and Peter have been touring together as the Bad Boys
Rock
of Kiss tour, which has a kind of a cheap ring to it.
Yeah.
Now they're not touring together as playing together. It's Ace's band and Peter's band.
Right.
And then I think they do an encore together.
Yeah, I think it was an encore of like Strange Ways or something.
I'm not 100% sure if this is George Sewitt's idea. George Sewitt is Peter's manager. I'm not sure if he's Ace's manager.
I think he was both of theirs. I don't know if it was at this point, but definitely later on.
And George Sewitt had been the tour manager for Kiss in 1979 and 1980, all through the quote-unquote Super Kiss era.
Yeah.
So he's not unfamiliar to Gene and Paul. He will kind of prove to be a bit of a stone in their shoe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
say the least.
At any rate, but that's kind of in the future. We'll probably reach that at some point.
He kind of flexed it already a little bit during the Unplugged era.
Yeah, we talked I think a little bit about that in the last episode.
Yep.
He's made things needlessly difficult on occasion.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he's also very clearly obviously aware the potential here and the potential for his percentages in it.
Yeah, because of course, as we know from the Unplugged session, everybody got super excited when Peter and Ace came back.
Yeah.
My band is back together.
Yeah, and it's funny how that incarnation of Kiss is regarded as my band. Everyone has a personal take on it. Like, it's not our band. That's my band.
Yeah. See, my Kiss does this.
Kiss, yeah. There was reluctance on the part of MTV to even see this thing commercially released. I don't know the details on that, or if it was just some sort of a push-pull duality. I think I mentioned this in the previous episode. If you haven't listened to it, go back and check it out. But the interesting twist of events here is Danny Goldberg, who was Kiss's PR guy in the 70s, and was the head of Swan Song Records at one point. We've talked about him in previous episodes. Well, he is now the CEO of Mercury, which is Kiss's record label. And he is able to cut through the red tape and sort out the details and, cross the I's and dot the T's and all that fun stuff to have Unplugged released commercially.
Well, did you run into, because you bringing this up now is reminding me some. I feel like it was because in the past MTV Unplugged records, it was released under MTV Records and it was under their own subsidy, and like the bands got a certain percentage, but of course Gene/management wasn't going to be happy with that, and they wanted to release it their own way.
I don't know. I tried to look that up and I couldn't find information on that, and I didn't dig deeply enough, obviously, but I knew it was enough of a problem. But what was more interesting to me was the fact that of all people that was able to do this, it was Danny Goldberg, who has had a relationship with Kiss at this point in time 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting to me that he also has created a plan to have the entire back catalog, Kiss's entire back catalog, remastered and reissued.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this, of course, is to serve to a much greater purpose, which is, of course, a full-scale reunion.
But this time just with
the original members in full regalia. Yeah, but he lobbied very heavily for this. And according to him, when he approached the band with the idea, they countered by saying, we've already been discussing this for a full 2 years.
I believe it. You even read.
So this predates even the Unplugged reunion. This goes back, and and we've talked about how they're embracing their past as a means to
this is also
chart a course for the future.
And this is also the era where like a lot of like classic rock bands are like doing reunion tours, like the Eagles, for example, and getting like a shit ton of money as a result.
Yeah, and things tend to work in cycles. In the 70s, all things retro was the 50s.
Right.
And you had Happy Days and American Graffiti and Grease and stuff like this. In the 80s, particularly in the tail end of the 80s, everything retro was the 60s. Mm-hmm. You had the Wonder Years. You saw a Grateful Dead come back, curiously enough. You had movies that...
Vietnam movies.
Yeah, Vietnam movies like Out There, Yin Yang. So as we're moving into the 90s, of course, the retro vibe becomes the 70s. So you see, like you said, the Eagles reunion or whatever. And now you're seeing kind of a more of a reflection of the past. And obviously, I mean, in 1986... 10 years prior to this time, do you think Mercury would have any interest in reissuing the entire Kiss back catalog? No. And it's been detailed in other places just how poorly they put together the old, the older material when they were releasing it in the 80s. It was such haphazardly put together and so shoddily put together that there's websites that detail all the weird little.
And I've gone down that.
This,
and I've gone down that rabbit hole, man. And I don't have his name pulled up because it really just wasn't as important to the topic we're going to be discussing today. But props to that guy,
Robert Connie.
Okay, yes, he's the guy that did all the liner notes. Then
I think he was. Yeah, I think he was.
I
always
remember
had his
listening.
Finger in that.
Yes, I remember hearing. Okay, yeah, Robert was a true MVP for historian level stuff around this time period, and it was cool seeing folks like him now being part of the record industry, because it was the first time you were starting to really see the fans now being in charge.
Yeah, get a piece of the action, I guess. I don't think he ever really got a good piece of the action as far as financially, but
no. But I will say, from a personal level, since we're talking about the Kiss remasters just a little bit, on a personal level, that's where I got a lot of my original history, because Mom was buying those remasters a lot, and every time she bought the CD, she would hand me the jewel case. She's like, while we're listening to it, you need to read it.
Oh, yeah.
And I would read the inside, because it was the clear jewel case that had the notes in it.
This have still yet to come. This is just the
the
germ of the idea is happening in this time.
Yeah, but props to him. He's good at it.
Yeah, and props to Danny Goldberg for having the vision to do it.
Yeah.
And the power.
Right.
But of course, it's all feeding towards an end. Like I said, I mean, and to consider, again, as usual, Kiss, Gene and Paul, they're going to hedge their bet as always.
Right.
And how so? Well, there's again, a lot going on, but they are in the studio making a new album with
Eric Singer
and Bruce Kulick. At this point, the band is, again, basically self-managed. Larry Mazer had quit over the stupid idea of a self-tribute album.
Right. Now, do you think that was a good call for him to kind of quit over that?
Given the ultimate what happened? No, probably not. But it was probably good for him in that moment. I mean, it was the right decision at the right time for him, probably, because he probably saw this as like, you know what? I'm supposed to be a creative involvement here, and you're just steamrolling over my ideas. You're not even taking them into account. You're going to go do your own thing no matter what I say. Wouldn't you quit too? It's like, am I a partner here? What are you paying me to do here? I mean, it would have been easy for him just to collect the money, but you know,
he was a creative too.
Maybe he just didn't see the money right away.
I might be calling this wrong, but I'm just saying from an outside perspective, I can see totally why he would quit. And he wasn't wrong. You know, the idea of doing curating your own tribute album is the corniest, most,
bottom dollar though.
The bottom dollar was nothing because shit didn't sell.
Now you were talking about, I think it was like you or Williams were talking about this or something like how Garth Brooks' involvement with Kiss should have put them over,
and it didn't. Yeah. My friend Jeff Williams made a comment on one of the Facebook posts about this, and we are a presence on Facebook somewhere if you wish to go find it.
The Something Good Network.
Yeah. Right. Yes. Well, there you go.
We'll share your thoughts and comment on them.
You can always find the links in the episode description.
The involvement of Garth Brooks, I realized I think I had made my point poorly in that episode. That yes, Garth Brooks was a major, major, major star,
right?
And that was the point I guess I failed to make, was how, and of course they wanted to play a track with him as to tie their name to the biggest star in show business at that point,
right?
And of course it did nothing.
Right.
They didn't even release it as a single, which is mind-blowing to me.
I know it.
Yeah, considering he was such a red hot star.
Because he was such a star, you would think if they played their cards right, that maybe they would have gotten, maybe if not a big hit, at least something,
Yeah.
Well, anyway, but then again, if Larry Mazer wasn't involved, he wasn't there to pull the string to make that happen. He probably would have seen the potential in that. Who knows? That's just speculative.
Right.
I still don't know where, if anywhere, Dr. Jesse Hilson is in the picture. I don't know if he's long gone at this point or not.
Yeah, you don't hear anything about him.
No, he was kind of there for a minute and then just kind of swept away.
Well, he didn't sweep away. He ran away.
Yeah.
Apparently with a pocket full of cash. At any rate, they are also working on securing new management. And this happens when they hire Doc McGee. And Doc McGee had managed all the mega platinum 80s bands like Motley Crue, Bon Jovi, Skid Row, and I guess Scorpions, other hard rock acts that had been far more successful than Kiss during the 80s.
So Doc was already on board while they were recording Carnival of Souls.
I don't know. They were hiring him in this process. That's what I'm saying. All of this sort of blurs together, so I don't know exact dates, because we know he's totally on board, and his whole idea to do this.
Because I was going to say, Carnival of Souls was recorded from November 95 to February 96.
Yeah, right. So this is the time frame we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But the only reason to take on Kiss, there's only one reason.
Yeah, if you're going
to be the manager of the Kiss that reunites.
Exactly.
So
and
this
from
is
every
all
story,
in play.
Yeah.
And allegedly Peter is already contacted in December and initially turns it down. So they have to kind of work on him a little bit with that. George Suet says, you ought to do this. George Suet's on board. He's the guy that's like, what are you, fucking crazy? And so Peter has to be kind of coerced for a minute.
Because Peter's finally at a place where he's like, a little bit more comfortable. I think
he's more at peace with life and knows that this is going to be a lot.
Yeah.
But I mean, we'll talk about that in a future episode. But let's talk a little bit about Doc McGee, because who the hell is Doc McGee and where does he come from? Well, obviously we just said he was a major player in the late 80s, managing the biggest names in hard rock.
A super manager, if you will.
But where does he come from? Doc McGee was a small-time band manager whose best-known client by the early, maybe tail end 70s or very early 80s was Pat Travers. Boom, boom, out goes the lights.
Right. Kind of mid-tier at the time.
But what Doc McGee is probably better known for is he is a major wheeler dealer in the drug trade.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
And we know this because, to be fair, I did some research on this, and a lot of this might be sketchy, so I may have facts wrong. So I'm not...
Allegedly.
So all of this is, it's not allegedly because he's arrested in 1982 while trying to smuggle 20 tons of dope into the United States. Do you know where this occurs?
At the fuck. Yeah, you called me on it. If you had not said, I could have told you. Go ahead.
North Carolina.
Yeah. What was the specific route, though? Because I thought that was...
I don't know. I just know that... I mean, coastal North Carolina, I've known for... Even in the 80s, I mean, it was kind of like I don't know if it's an open secret, but that was one of the major points for where drugs flooded into America, because the coast of Carolina is just riddled with, like, islands and inways for, it's a very difficult area to patrol.
Right.
So coastal Carolina has always been... a spot for that, or had been.
Just Hilton Head Island, just a fucking...
That's South Carolina, but that was the appeal for the smugglers.
Right.
And so he gets popped. He's facing 30-year sentence if convicted. This is in 1980. Well, I think this doesn't go to trial until the late 80s.
Right, because then he does like a whole thing for it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he avoids his serious time because I think he turned state's evidence. I don't know. But from what I understood, he assisted in helping feds earn other convictions, which means he ratted.
Yeah.
Right.
To save his own ass.
He looks like the face of a rat.
So, and then he had an involvement with the Make a Difference Foundation, or founded it in response to this. Like, look what I'm doing.
This is his community
I'm not 100%
service.
sure of that either. I know he's involved to a degree. And that ultimately leads to the notorious Moscow Peace Festival.
Yeah.
What year was that? 1989?
Something like that. It had to have been 89.
Cap and I watched a semi-documentary on that recently.
I remember it was Ozzy Bon Jovi, Motley Crue,
Metallica.
I don't think it was Metallica.
Yeah,
It was
Metallica. Yeah.
There was
Scorpions.
a ton. There was like too many heavy hitters on this bill kind of thing.
And the stories behind it, of course, the great. In addition to, if you love irony, there you go. This thing is like a traveling drug caravan.
Yeah.
And I think he's supplying the fucking shit.
Yeah,
It's Motley Crue in the 80s.
Two Motley Crue.
And Ozzy. What the fuck do you think they're doing on the plane?
The point being,
sorry, it's just irony, a fun side too.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The irony of a former drug dealer becoming the manager of KISS cannot be more or overstated.
I don't know if you see interviews from Doc McGee from like this time period on, it's like super like professional, just deadpan.
Absolutely.
Of course, he's good at putting on that face.
But of course, and he never has ever addressed this. He refuses to talk about it.
He's been a little candid about it on the cruise.
Oh, has he?
A little bit, because he's planning on writing a book soon. And he mentioned
how
that
much
kind of stuff.
Honesty is going to be in that, though.
Right.
It'd be interesting to see at least his take.
I mean, it just seems to me pretty curious. But the irony, of course, is Gene and Paul is like, Ace and Peter were just totally fucked up all through the 70s. They were completely unreliable.
Exactly.
And I'm like, yeah, Doc McGee was probably their goddamn drug dealer.
But they're also really chomping at the bit to have Ace and Peter back.
I know, but I'm just saying, as far as Doc McGee, it's
the idea of managing the ship.
It's the idea of a guy that was a drug dealer.
Mm-hmm.
What if I think
the two guys
on
that never
scale.
On that scale, I mean, it's beyond like
this
really.
This dude wasn't selling some.
If there's
weed
anything
to the
more
neighborhood
bizarre
kids.
to me, I'm speaking personally. If anything's more bizarre to me than having your psychiatrist be your fucking manager, oh no, we can't have him. But how about that drug dealer over there? Look at the drug dealer. He knows how to manage money.
I was gonna say, here's what's it come down to, man. With Gene and Paul, is the cash, and I'm not saying that negatively, but what does it come down to with the two of them?
Of course,
Gene even talks about this in his book.
But so they look at what has he done for these bands? He's made them a ton of money.
I agree.
But and Doc kind of takes a role in the reunion process as a manager, where he's not, digging, making more than Gene and Paul either. I don't think
this is purely speculation.
Yeah.
And this is, and I'm not saying this happened, but I could imagine that this happened. How would Doc McGee get to pick up these groups back in the day? Hey, not only can I be your manager, but guess what? I'm going to help you. I can help you under the radar, score some shit if you need it.
Yep.
All
inclusive management.
And I'm sure taking a percentage for his quote unquote services on top of that under the table. It just seems like this guy just is sketchy as fuck to me.
Oh yeah.
I've always got that vibe from every interview I've ever seen from him. He just seems so disingenuous, dishonest, and so shady that I'm like, how could he ingratiate himself to two guys as supposedly, allegedly, as business savvy as Gene and Paul are? Because this just proves that they aren't that business savvy.
I think
they have a certain acumen that they've been able to assume over the years, having done this, but they're still allowing themselves to be open to shady characters that'll come in promising them the sky, sun, stars, and moon, and they take this guy. He's a fucking drug dealer.
I think every band manager,
drug dealer.
Every band manager from like that time period from the 70s, 80s was like sketchy as hell. Like your Irving Azoffs in the world. All that kind of shit.
And in all fairness.
And that's not an unusual practice, by the way. I'm currently reading a book by a guy named David Liebert. David Liebert was Alice Cooper's tour manager, most famously in the early 70s. Went on to do a lot of work with P-Funk, George Clinton. He's just written a book called The Rock and Roll Warrior. Mm-hmm. It's been a really great read. It's worth seeking out, but it's kind of the same thing. You know what he ended up doing? Dealing drugs. He's pretty open about it, and like we said, that kind of we add this additional service, and he's open about that. I'm sure there's probably some other managers that may have done that. I don't know.
Yeah,
but I'm just saying this guy started
right.
Whereas David Liebert started as a road manager and had been a pop star in the 60s, became a road manager, and then slid into the drug thing. This guy's the guy that went the other way around. This guy failed upwards.
And in at least a little bit of defense in all this, I don't think Kiss has ever not had semi-shady characters around. It's like, as much as we would love to talk, so many great things about Bill and Coyne, even he has skeletons in the closet that we don't need to bear mention here. He's done some not so great things. There's also been some other people around Kiss that have not been so great. So, I mean, I honestly think around this time period, Gene and Paul aren't even looking at what the shady bit. I think they were perfectly swindled by someone that was already learning emotional EQ at an early time. At that point, essentially what you do is you're able to read the people that you're pitching to and be able to pitch to their level. He understands Gene and Paul are big thinkers. They want someone that thinks outside the box. He studied who they were and became the type of salesman that he knew was going to hook them, because what was he saying? We're going to have you play in all the wonders of the world. He was over pitching to show them I'm willing to do anything. And then with Doc's personality type, he's willing to do anything for cash.
I get that.
So he is the fetching boy.
Right.
And that feeds into Gene and Paul's ego. Oh, not only do we have a big thinker, but we have a fetching boy at the same time? I feel like he just perfectly knew how to deal with their personality types to get himself in.
Because I'm sure John Bon Jovi and the guys in Motley Crue aren't that too dissimilar from a big.
How different is a Nick Six from a Gene Simmons?
I totally agree with all of what you just said, but and of course, everywhere you go, someone's got a big butt. Let's talk about my big butt. My butt on that is, at this point, if they had any kind of savvy whatsoever, though, it would seem to me they would step back and go, well, something to consider here. Yeah, he did manage or is manager of Motley Crue. But what's going on with Motley Crue in 1996?
Nothing.
He was the manager is the manager for Bon Jovi. What's Bon Jovi doing in 1996? Scorpions.
80s bands.
These 80s bands. It's like, if a manager's worth his weight or his salt or whatever you want to say, wouldn't he be shepherding them through these hard, difficult times? And the same can be said for Larry Mazer. I mean, Larry Mazer was doing Cinderella. I mean, at some point, I was talking about this with a friend yesterday, and I had missed this. Larry Mazer apparently had gotten to a point where they had threw a $2 million tour kickoff party with an equally multi-million-dollar stage show, and we're like, here we go. They played one show. And the rest of the tour was canceled, and they threw the stage literally in the trash. So what can be said about Larry Mazer? So don't think I'm just singling out Doc McGee, but I would be stopping and thinking, okay, these guys represent a time and place, but if they're looking to the future, it would seem to me that especially in light of what we're going to talk about here in a minute, the type of album that they're getting ready to, or that they are recording.
Yeah.
That they would be looking at the managers of these younger bands that are pushing towards, a future direction, and not so much of where have you been and what have you done. It's like, what are you doing and what are you going to do? But that's just me thinking, again, it's all speculative. What you said makes total sense.
And I have one tiny but to work with what you said, even kind of expand on it. So that would make sense. But what did Gene and Paul say a little bit earlier? We've been thinking about this reunion for the last 2 years.
Yeah, and they wanted,
and they know how cutthroat the music industry is.
Right.
Maybe they're looking at it as, well, Doc sent them upward, and because we know how the music industry works and we know what even happened with us, they're on their decline. Maybe we're his next project. Yeah. Maybe we're going to get relaunched with him.
And that's all in regard with what you just said.
Yeah.
So I think
what cut the truth away.
And I think what you just said, the way you described it, the big thinking and all that, is exactly what sold them. You're absolutely right.
And maybe we
right
can just ride this out for a little bit and get a new manager.
That's true. They might have been thinking, well, we'll just see how this goes, because they don't have 100% faith in a reunion either.
No.
But they are still working towards it. And of course they know how to hype something like that, but that's all going to be in the very near future. But before we get to that, we got business on the table here.
Yeah. And it also goes to show
unpleasant business, but business all the same.
But also goes to show that they don't 100% believe in the reunion yet.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So they're in the studio. This is all through the fall and winter of 95 and 96.
Yes. And actually pretty well documented on a bonus feature on one of the Kissology DVDs. That's actually something I would love to see get released. So there's like that 3 and 4 hours worth of MTV Unplugged rehearsal footage that's been out there for years. I'd love to see more of the recording of this record
stuff.
Because regardless, and I feel like y'all can agree with me on this, regardless of what the material is, there's not a lot of footage of Kiss in the studio.
Yeah, of any sort. No.
It would be very interesting, even for this lackluster record, to see Paul go through a full vocal take and how he responds to different things and the retakes and seeing Gene work through different bass parts. Even if we don't care about the material, seeing them work.
The process.
That would be so interesting. But we do get little glimpses of it in the Kissology. So that actually kind of helps give the album a touch bit more of life.
Well, there's
none to be found here.
But I think, I think one reason why they don't like that stuff, or any act doesn't like that stuff, is it kind of it removes a little bit of the mystique behind it.
Showing them how the sausage is made.
The idea is that you think that they go in and deliver that take all in one full take, It's like of anything.
As fans, we love it, but I can see how the layman might.
Yeah, you don't really want to. Yeah, it's like how did you just say? You don't see how the sausage is made. Yeah. It's like
But then all three of us. But then all three of us that have had studio time and know how the sausage is made is like, okay, I want to see them make the sausage.
Yeah. What's the process? This album they are recording apparently is Gene's grand idea.
Yes.
And the idea being that they should start from scratch as if they were a brand new band without any baggage or reputation to live up to. This just seems incredibly stupid to me.
And, Gene is known for his great concept record ideas.
This just seems double stupid to me because it's like, okay, y'all have just spent the last really almost now 5 years embracing, the idea of classic Kiss. You would think that to that end, you would work towards kind of recapturing and recreating that sound because that's what people are responding to. But no.
And also, that's very contradictory to everything else they're doing. For him to say, let's go at this like we're a new band without any baggage, after they just finished MTV Unplugged with the reunion.
Right, that's what I mean. Yeah. That's exactly what I'm saying.
It's like... It's very contradictory.
I could see them going, okay, guys, we're going to have to make an album that sounds like classic Kiss, almost like saying, and I'm sure they would say it. I don't have any doubt in my mind. They'd be like, Bruce, you're going to have to play a more economical style. Right. You're going to basically have to play Ace Frehley licks.
Yeah, verbatim.
And this would be like,
Eric,
we want to capture that
we need
vibe.
To get rid of your double kick.
A very basic hard rock, with a lot of anthemic
rock and roll all night, party every day.
A little bit of R&B influence, the classic Kiss, quote unquote formula from back in the day, the stuff that everyone seems to love so much. But no, instead, now they want to be
a grunge band.
Well, I mean, a decade prior they wanted to be Bon Jovi. Now they want to be Soundgarden or Smashing Pumpkins.
And this is even more insincere to me than even their hair metal era.
So that's so convoluted. It's just so. I mean,
and this is what 1996. I think grunge had peaked and kind of started to just die off in this time period
kind of
too.
Just
anyway,
melded into this alternative thing.
Yeah,
and it's an interesting time for the recording industry. It's much like the late '60s. In the late '60s, you had a lot of what they call garage rock groups that came out, had a top 10 hit, came from nowhere, had their top 10 hit, and went back to nowhere. And it's the same thing here now. The industry standard is, in the 70s, it was, okay, we're going to sign a band, we'll give them 3 albums to develop. It's like, okay, they expected, hope for 100,000, 150,000 on the first time out and keep incrementally growing until they got to the gold record status. Yep. Well, that gold record status became the start point in the 80s.
Yeah.
And we want you to get to that million seller. Well, then by the mid 80s, late 80s, we've talked about this. Bands were coming out of the gate with 12 million fucking sales, not Kiss. So Kiss were basically kept going in reverse in a way. And it's in a, how do I say this? The scale keeps sliding, every time they reach a standard, that scale, and the scale gets slid up a little bit further than where they're at. So by this point in the 90s, these bands are coming out of nowhere, these alternative bands. They get signed, they sell 1 million copies, they have 2 or 3 little hits on modern rock radio.
Yeah, on their CDs with 15 tracks on them and shit.
Yeah, but you have all these bands that had million-selling records just out of the gate. Bands like
Spin Doctors.
Spin Doctors, first one that came to my head. Or Sponge, or Better Than Ezra, and some of these bands will end up opening for Kiss on their reunion tour. Stabbing Westward, all these bands that
Fuel.
I can remember. I can't think of all their names. I can hear some of the songs in my head, but
Buzz Ballads, compilation
there's
shit.
just all these bands that came up. They had million-selling records, and then they just disappeared.
Yep. Disposable. It was that ice cream machine pop music.
That's what
here's a hit.
If you didn't sell 1 million copies, they just wrote you off. We have a friend that was in a band that they waited to get a multi-album deal, and that benefited them because their record didn't sell. They got signed to A&M. Their record didn't sell, and now the record company, since they had the way the deal was structured, the record company ended up owing them money for undelivered material because they dropped them and they're like, here, take this money and go away.
Yeah.
And those guys were set up pretty good to go pursue other interests in life and still were successful.
Yeah.
That was not the norm. The band Soundgarden had signed to, I think, A&M and failed to recoup their advance because people don't understand it. An advance is an advance. You have to pay that money back.
It's a loan.
And I knew a friend of mine was on tour, goes through a place in Minneapolis, and who's working in the kitchen? Guys from Soundgarden. He knew who they were, and he's like, what the fuck are you guys doing here? And they're like, we owe the record company money.
Yeah.
And they're working menial labor jobs just to,
pay it back.
They obviously turned it around because they hopped on that bandwagon that sold 1 million records, but where they finally did it. But once it was
for
done,
a minute,
it was over.
Yeah.
So that was not uncommon, and I'm sure that had to have been a tightrope that Kiss had to know they were going to be walking on, with the industry being what it is. But to that end, they're going to make this record.
Do you think Gene would be that knowledgeable to think that far ahead, or is he just looking at what's happening right here, right now?
They have to be aware that they have to be aware that
20
at
years
any
of experience
point,
at this point,
they could get dropped.
Oh, I'm
Just
talking
like
about musically, that it being so dated.
I don't. That's what I'm saying. I don't understand why they wouldn't make. It seems to me the safer alternative here, no pun intended, is to do a classic Kiss record, very much a 70s styled Kiss
maybe it's
record.
because Revenge was so well received, at least in the fan base. Like, it
in
didn't
the fan
sell
base,
a
but it didn't
lot.
sell. They're not interested in the fan base at all.
Well, but they just got off the convention tour where they
They're
spoke
still
with
not
a lot
interested.
of fans.
That's fine, but if that were true, then they would definitely make this 70s style record. They're not interested in what the fans think. They're interested in a mainstream.
Why do you not think they're
acceptance.
interested in the fans think?
Because
if they're
they
about
got
to...
that. It's like, have you ever seen Crossroads, the movie Crossroads, where Ralph Macchio and
the part at the end.
The old man's like, okay. He's like, what do I get? And he's trying to renew his deal. He sold his soul to the devil, and he's like, what do I get? He's like, well, you got me. He's like, I've already got you. I don't need you. I've got you. It's the same thing here. Kiss already has their fans. They already know that there's a base that exists. To this day, you could put a turd in a plastic bag with a Kiss logo on it, and those motherfuckers will buy it.
They sell air guitar strings.
Yeah.
For $8.
So there you go. They don't give a fuck about the fans because the fans are there. They don't care. It's just like when you go on the Kiss cruise, they give a fuck about fans. You go to the Kiss cruise, what are you going to see? Classic Kiss songs that they may have never even played before.
Yeah.
But when they go out on tour, you're not going to hear any of that shit.
No,
because they don't give a fuck about who's the. They don't. They just don't.
He's getting
It's
all
the end
riled
of the
up.
day.
I agree with him.
Kiss does not care about their fans at all.
We can Kiss getting any good guy.
No,
any
I'm
good
with him
guest
100%.
on
We
this show.
were worried about this episode being any good, but I'm not saying it in a bad way. I'm just saying it as a point of actual fact. I'm not saying they don't give a fuck about their fans, but what I'm saying is they know that's there.
That's not the bottom line.
They take it for granted. That's not their bottom line. That's it kind of is it's their foundation, and they know that they're cool there. They don't have to worry about that.
Right.
The fans are going to buy this shit, and to a point, we'll discuss that here at the end of this process here.
Yeah.
But so they're going to make a grunge record. They hire Toby Wright, who was the producer of Alice in Chains.
Yeah.
And the plan is to make a dark, heavy, modern rock record.
That's the
which means grunge.
Yep.
Or Alice in Chains.
Or
very specifically with these guitar sounds.
Yeah, it's very much. I mean, and when I say grunge, I mean the MTV version. We've talked about the divergence of punk rock and this. Kiss wants to make their grunge record, and they want to cash in, and they want to cash in big. And so the irony and the hypocrisy is so rich that you can kind of gag on this.
Yeah. That's kind of how I felt about this whole record too. I mean, I think it kind of, we can probably, when we go into these tracks specifically and point out little things that we might like about it, I think the Gene songs kind of work in this lens, but with Paul, it just feels even more like a reach.
Well, my favorite, I think As much as I know this record very well, the reason I really dug into it at an early age is because of such the anomaly that we'll get into at the tail end of this. That's what made me so curious about it, and really dig in and listen a lot when I was younger. But that doesn't necessarily mean I enjoy the record, and I think Paul's quote on this really sums it up best. He goes, "Kiss, writing a doom and gloom record? What do we have to write about this being doom and gloom? What, that our butler showed up late?"
Well, I don't know, because we talked about how they've kind of struggled through the last, 15 years at this point. But
it's also interesting how Paul kind of admits, kind of backhandedly, because it's just a bad record anyway, but admits that he had a hard time writing this record, that he doesn't like his own contributions to the record, but just put it in anyway. So it's kind of a flip. Gene really liked his material for once, and Paul was kind of phoning it in.
Yeah, I think it fits Gene. If Gene did this as a solo record, it might be a little bit more forgivable.
But this is produced...
you're right.
Yeah, well, you know who this really feels like it's a record of more than anybody?
Bruce,
yeah.
Well, because Bruce plays a lot of bass and guitar on this record.
He wrote a lot of this too.
Yeah,
and that's not a jab at Bruce, because, we'll get to that to the summary.
Yeah.
But this is recorded at a place called Music Grinder Studios in Hollywood, which I've never ever heard of before. And it seems an abnormally long time, even for Kiss standards. They spend 4 months making this thing?
November to February. Well, you have to imagine
3 months maybe, if you were.
Yeah, cut out Christmas and New Year era.
But it's still kind of a...
Although there is footage of them in the studio with Bruce with a Santa hat on, so they were recording close to Christmas at least.
And again, they're also negotiating a complete whole other thing. So they are literally
especially
playing.
If Peter got contacted in December, they're literally in the middle of it. They're like, "All right, see you later, Bruce." All right, get Peter on the phone.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think there's any way that Eric and Bruce didn't know about all this going on at the same time too.
Okay, since we're kind of still on that, they've discussed it a little bit. They said they had a feeling, but at the same time were willing to just go at it with blinders on because they wanted the record to be done.
And we have to note the thing that everyone seems to forget and has to remember: these aren't members of Kiss. They're just employees.
Yeah.
As much as you want to romanticize the idea of Kiss as a band, we're all in it together. No, they're employees.
The moment
at the end of the day, Kiss, there's only 2 members in Kiss as a legal entity, as
since
a band.
the 80s.
Since 1982, since the time Ace Frehley left, Kiss is Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley. Kiss is not a band. They are a duo. That is true to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people hate that. They don't want to accept that. But trust me, anyone and everyone, including Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer, are instantly disposable if need be. And they will not blink twice to serve that in.
And in a year, they're going to have 2 employees named Peter Criscola and Paul Fraley.
Yeah. And they're going to have a really hard time with that concept. But anyway,
these 2 employees were starting to actually feel comfortable in their spots.
And why wouldn't they? Because, you're given a lot of creative leeway. But we've talked about this in the past. That was Vinnie Vincent's hang up. He was given a ton of creative leeway, and rightly so. And yet they would not allow him to become a full-fledged member of the band. And so he wouldn't sign his contract. And again, for all the personality differences or whatever, who can blame him? If it's what you want, and he was willing to walk away.
Yeah.
And he did. And
and Bruce kind of talked about it. He goes, he kind of felt on the outside until Revenge. Revenge is when it felt like he said he finally gelled with the band and felt like a member, and that this was going to be the record where he finally stepped out some.
Well, and I think part of that was because they really didn't know what the fuck to do, and they needed someone else to outside write. And this was somebody that they probably could also retain at a lower rate than another outside writer like a Desmond Child or whoever. I'm sure there's a financial benefit in that somewhere.
Because if you go through the songwriting credits of this album, it's a bunch of names I could only find on Discogs and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, let's go ahead and at least into track 1.
So first song is called Hate, which pretty strong title for a opening track.
It's a Gene song too.
So straight out of the chute, we've got drop D tuning and clip metalized riffing, and this really sounds like it could be an outtake from Revenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is not quite as anomalous as the rest of this record's going to sound.
Like, honestly,
It's very metal sounding, though.
Yeah.
I was going to say, spoiler, this Hate and one other, to me, it feels like if they had made it an EP and like had those be like the two mains and maybe filled it in with one or two others, this would be a lot more forgivable because the riff in this is kind of cool. It's just not a Kiss riff.
Well, that's the way this whole record works, I think. Well, that's the way Kiss has worked for the last 15 years. It's and then you go, well, how could it not be Kiss if they've been doing it for this long? Well, every era is a little. There's always a shift.
Yeah, there's some metal stuff I like, and it's like when I listen to this, I go, it's a cool riff. Like if a different band played it.
It's a decent opening track, but it feels like to me this would work really well for another band.
Yeah.
I feel like this whole record could in a lot of ways.
And I feel like almost every song's going to suffer from a very forgettable chorus. Because you don't remember the chorus at all in this. You remember the verse because of the interesting little drum pattern.
Which we've talked about seems to be their MO in songwriting.
And it's no different here. It's like, I can't really remember the solo to this. I just remember the overall vibe it had. And it was just interesting and cool.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to have a similar response to like a good majority of the tracks on this album. I have my favorites by both Gene and Paul on it, but for the most part, one thing this album suffers from is there's not a lot of diversity of guitar tones or keys and stuff like that. So as a result, they kind of meld together.
Yeah.
But Hate overall is like, a decent, Gene song for an attempt to sound like a grunge song, but that's it really.
Next track is called Rain.
This sounds like, when I was listening to this record, this was a song that even came on today that kind of matched the tone of, what's going on right now. It's just like, it's a mess outside.
And dark.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Overcast.
like you said just a minute ago, and all the songs sort of go to this. There's no real song here.
Yeah.
Except for the middle eight, and that's not a good song.
Yeah.
So it's a collection of riffs that seemingly just have been stapled together out of like scraps to me. It feels like, okay, I have this. Well, if we, put it in the same key, well, there you go. We can go from that to, and it doesn't really jive well. So,
Right,
and this kind of material is just not Paul's strong suit.
And that's why it feels a little off. Like I mentioned earlier, where like the Paul songs are a little bit more jarring than Gene's, because like his vocal tone does not match this kind of style of music at all, I don't think.
Yeah.
All right, Barry, get ready. So on the Kissology DVD, there is an outtake that actually makes the song a little better. It gives it a dynamic. During the chorus, Paul just lets it belt, just like, I think it's gonna rain. Yeah, I think it's gonna rain. There's a clip on there of Gene and Eric in the vocal booth. In between Paul's, he goes, I think it's gonna rain. I think it's gonna rain.
Oh, they did it.
Rain. Like that. They were doing kind of like call and response background things, and it added a bit more dynamic to it. And that would have actually been more interesting. Otherwise, this song is boring as hell.
I don't think it would have improved it any. But you stumbled on a point. There seemed like vocal patterns that were very common to the Alice in Chains sound.
Yeah. All that, a lot of harmonizing too.
Things.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Open your
Which became the bedrock for all these shitty bands like Nickelback and Creed and everything else. I mean, they're all rooted in the Alice in Chains thing more than anything else, which goes to show just how influential Alice in Chains proved to be. Love them or hate them, it's irrelevant. That's just their,
that's just what happened.
That's what happened.
I found a positive, which I just remembered thinking about the outtakes. This is my second favorite era of Paul vocal, because by this point he had a shift. He's not doing his 80s vocal anymore, if you notice, even on his high notes. It's not his 80s vocal. He has a 90s vocal.
It's a little deeper.
But it's a 90s vocal that's trying to sound like somebody else.
But no, on the middle part on this, on that, the open your eyes. Right. When he gets to that really high, screamy falsetto bit, it sounds like the I Still Love You bit from MTV Unplugged, which I think is extremely strong. Mm-hmm. So I think he's found a new way to push his high vocal without it being that tone that only dogs can hear. So benefit on my end is even though they're kind of boring songs, there's glimmers of some really good Paul performances.
Still sounds weird with this music.
Yeah, it didn't work for me.
I'm trying to find a positive, goddammit.
I understand that, but it's like, okay, he's got some tools in the box, but if you can't use them, what good are they?
Yeah.
He'll use them
or
in a
if
year.
you got them, I mean, so you got nothing to use them on.
It's like the Bruce Kulick guitar solos. They're all good, but that doesn't make the song any better.
It's like going, well, I've got this, you know what? I got this car jack. I'm going to just change my tire for the hell of it. You know what I mean? It's like, why? That's the way this whole album sort of works. Master and Slave.
I like the riff on this one.
Really, really good riff.
But that's about it.
Well, I wrote, listening to this makes me wonder if they played in standard tuning with better lyrics, would it have worked?
Maybe.
I get that vibe. There's a couple of songs on this album that I really got that vibe off of. I'm like, and that's what made me start thinking, if they had done the approach of doing a more 70s stylized kind of, we're going to try to recapture what we were doing in the 70s, but with this lineup, rather than do this grunge thing. There are riffs here that would have served that really well, I think.
I have one in mind that's like that later on, too.
So, but this song is the reverse of their problems. I feel like the intro and the chorus is strong. The verses are limp. It's when it just goes to just the straight kick and the bass, and Paul's like...
Right. But here's what I thought when I was listening to that was, even in this arrangement, this would have served a female vocal, I think, really, really well. And Paul could do, it's like it would serve kind of a sensual quality that a female could do really well. Paul could probably play that in a different way, but it doesn't work here.
That mindset.
It just doesn't here, and the lyrics are kind of like, it's like they're trying to be deep, but instead it's just pretentious.
Yeah.
But I could see that was the other impression I got. I was like, I don't mind that vocal pattern. I just could hear that suiting a female voice.
Again, good song for a different band.
Yeah. It's like, I'm not knocking the songwriting here. I'm knocking it as a Kiss album.
Yeah.
And everything I'm judging this is against Kiss itself.
Yeah.
If this would have been, and I was going to get to this in the summary, but this could have been a really successful album for another band.
Yeah.
It wouldn't necessarily be an album that I like, but I can appreciate the quality of what they were trying to do. It wouldn't be among
so many of the stinkers. It'd be like, well, in this era, at least there was this that was a little bit more listenable.
And this just is so anomalous for Kiss.
Yeah.
Even to what they've been doing. Childhood End is the next song.
See, this is the one I felt like adds to the point that you were talking about. If they did this with a direct hard rock approach, I think it would have been a better song.
This is actually my favorite on the record.
It's my favorite Gene song for sure.
I think it's a strong Gene vocal. I like what they did during the verse where all of a sudden it's the clean guitar.
Is this the part where, is this the one that goes, tell me, okay.
Yeah.
No. Is it?
It's the one that sounds kind of like I'm
Tell
18.
Me.
No. That's Master and Slave. Childhood's End.
Oh, see, it shows you how these just blur in my head.
No, the dun 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 dun. That's Master and Slave.
Okay, I didn't see.
This one has the
Childhood's End is the slower one with Gene.
Boom, 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 boom. But then it's not I'm 18
yeah,
anymore.
Okay.
Boom, boom. That's my favorite on the record. It feels like classic Gene writing with a grunge lens.
We're giving Barry Hannibal so much material.
I know, but I had to refresh your mind. I like the verses on this. It was really cool. It's a good Gene voice, even just the "so what, never mattered to you."
I have written that it's just a bad song.
Really?
Start to finish, weak melody that goes nowhere and does nothing memorable, and more importantly, and this is the impression, because I had, when I started preparing my notes for this was like a month or so ago, and I had to re-listen to it again, which I did today.
The things he does for you listeners.
And so I've listened to this album twice now.
Me too.
You're forever a changed man.
But that song to me most out of everything on this record, and I wrote this today, it sounds dated. It sounds very much of its time, which is the 90s. And I think that's always bad when you make music of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That applies to a lot of arts.
It'll always be stuck in that time.
But I don't know, something about this one, like, again, it's my favorite on the record. It feels like more time was spent with this. like songwriting wise. It felt more earnest. It felt like maybe this was like one of the first ones written for the era kind of thing. Like it just kind of felt like it flowed when the rest of them felt forced. It's like some of these songs feel really forced.
Yeah,
this one felt like it just kind of flowed, and like Gene was just kind of strumming and just turned, because is what he fucking does, and just turned his boombox on.
Yeah,
and
I don't know
went.
because I can't remember it off the top of my head at this point. But it didn't. After 2 listens, neither one of them did any good for me. The next song is called "I Will Be There," which I think must be Paul writing a song because
about his kid.
It's about his son.
This is my favorite Paul's track on the album, just because of how, like, it's not a super heavy one.
It's an acoustic.
It's an acoustic one. And this one's genuine too.
It immediately doesn't scream the era. It just sounds like an acoustic Paul song.
Yeah. I realized after the second listen that I came away with a different impression than I did from the first one.
Same here.
But both of them still, the song sort of meanders for me.
I mean, they all kind of do, but if I had to pick a Paul song that I really like, at least this one feels more genuine because it is about a serious subject that he's, it's his son that he's going to take very seriously.
I get that, and I can appreciate that. So the lyric of that doesn't really bother me, but it still seems a little kind of odd, just from a Kiss vibe. My initial impression was he was kind of wallowing in an acoustic Zeppelin worship, because at first it kind of brought into mind something like the Battle of Evermore, not lyrically but musically.
Or the Rain song, especially when you see the studio footage.
But even, but today, on my second listen, I didn't really get that vibe as much. So I kind of was like, I don't know what gave me that impression, but other than what I just said. So I don't know if that was really kind of a vibe he was going for here or not, or if that just sort of just seeped through, because I know that's an influence. But I
think another strong Paul vocal, especially on after the solo, which, by the way, best solo on the record was an acoustic one. This is the one solo I really remember, and it's a Bruce one, and it's really good. But as soon as it comes out of the solo, Paul just starts belting. It was especially with that, "Oh, I would be there," and just start super strong. And it just again goes to show that he's got a different tonality for the 90s, and it's better than his 80s tone. Nothing beats the 70s, but it's better than his 80s. It's an improvement.
Next track is called "Jungle,"
and this was the single that was released.
Was it?
Yes. In fact, your son Cody Ward actually has a CD single of this.
He must have got it from me.
Then at one point you had a CD single of this.
Yeah, and I remember who gave it to me and when I got it.
Yeah.
Because I thought it had Master and Slave on it.
It may have also, but I remember
I had a
Jungle
CD
on
single,
it.
And yeah,
because it was when I was going through my big time nerd thing, and I was hanging out with Cody one day, and I was like, and they released this really weird grunge record. He goes, "Yeah, I got a CD of it." I was like, "No, you don't." He's like, "Look at this," and showed it to him. I was like, "Oh, where'd you get that? Where did you?" Get it? So, I don't know. I was just in my
turn
CDs.
Around, we'll look and find that it's worth $500 online or something.
And then a whole bunch of 12 and 13-year-olds were smearing it with their Cheeto hands.
I just all I remember from this is it's got that, again, it's a dated 90s, that it's just not good at all.
This is actually the one I skipped the most.
It's not a good song.
And just odd lyrics, and even just the effect that's on the bass. The bass kind of has this watery kind of. It's not a wah, but it's some weird kind of
effect.
Yeah, almost dreamy, wavy effect,
like a little chorus effect.
To me, if you were to say, what is the most 90s sounding guitar tone and riff? It's the intro riff to this song. That down, 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 wow, wow, wow. It, to me, is just the most 90s guitar riff ever. So no, I usually, even on my reviews, I actually skipped this one every time. So I didn't spend any time with this song.
Pretty dated, but a lot of these fucking songs are.
Next track is called "In My Head."
God of Thunder Part 3.
Well, no, because it's the lyric is about. I'm like, is this what Gene thinks teenagers are thinking and feeling in 1996? The question here is, who's the target audience for this?
Folks who listen to Alice in Chains and Nirvana, man.
Let me kind of maybe put
who's the only target audience in their head.
Okay. I'm gonna throw a different idea at you. I think Gene is being earnest on this. I think when Gene mentally gets to a place, he feels everything he mentioned. Because think about the artwork he draws. Even still today, he draws a lot of that kind of line sketchy, demon-esque stuff. I think when he gets to a certain place, he can pull these type of lyrics and feel that way.
Was it him or was it old Tommy Thayer's singer, Jimmy St. James, who gets a fucking co-write on this?
Yeah, who knows? I get it, but it just seems... It's like,
also featured on
the kids, they feel really angsty and alienated now because, it's like the grunge kids will go around going, no one understands me.
Well, let him pull from his old, and let him pull from his classic feelings of being an immigrant, and even with the whole idea of wearing the makeup, look behind the mask. I feel it's kind of autobiographical with a little bit,
that's a fair observation. That's a fair observation. I don't know.
I think it's solid for a Gene track on this record. This is probably my second favorite.
It's very crunchy.
Yeah.
Crunchy is one of my favorite words. As my kids probably don't listen to this, but it's kind of a joke. The word crunchy comes from the movie Charlotte's Web. Paul Lynde did the voice of Templeton the Rat.
I never knew that.
He's bringing words for Charlotte to write in the web, and he brings the word crunch.
Oh, that's great.
It still makes me laugh. In the way he says it. Here's our word for you. Crunchy.
I watched that movie so many times as a kid, I never put that together. That was Jesus. Paul Lynde.
Anyway, you can cut that out.
No, let's go. That's staying.
It never goes away, which is true. The stupidity never goes away.
No.
Just drones. This is a very droning song.
Yes.
It's so boring.
A lot of these songs, when I did the re-listen today, I got about 3 minutes into it and went like, all right, I got it. And this was one of them.
This is a long record.
Yeah, very long.
This is an hour and change.
Yeah. This might be the longest one. We know Hot in the Shade was an hour.
Yeah.
We talked about that.
I think it was like an hour on the dot.
You got anything to add to that?
Honestly, I don't. This is one of the other final ones. I really just had nothing to say. This one is also the most forgettable next to Jungle.
Yeah, it just
in my
drones.
book.
It's a weird song because it's like got that drone. I don't know.
I really have nothing to say about it.
Seduction of the Innocent.
I got some shit to say about this one.
Well, apparently this is, now you talked about Gene's feelings, blah, 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 blah. This is rooted in something Gene wrote as a teenager, apparently. And it definitely channels the Beatles, which we know he loves to do. But I don't think it does it with much success. Usually his Beatles influence yields something, if not good, at least marginally interesting.
Something you can like gravitate towards with your ear and everything.
But for me personally, I found this to be mucked down with too much bullshit pretension.
Especially during the verses. That's my problem with it. I love the chorus to the song. Mm-hmm. I like his vocal melody over what Bruce decided to put behind it. That dun, 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 dun. He kind of like does a little walk down bend thing. Very tasteful. It's not overdone, but it complements Gene's vocal melody. And it just kind of flowed and was really nice. The verses are horrible with just that kind of drony guitar and almost kind of the bongos in the background and shit. I don't suffer through that. I can't stand that. But the chorus is real. I like it, especially with everything else that's on this record. Again, it just feels like the Gene moments really work. And this is one of the few Gene moments that if I could just... Okay, here's a good way to describe it. It's a perfect ringtone. There's a good 30...
A ringtone?
Yeah, seriously.
Wait.
I was like, what part?
There's a solid 30 seconds.
A ringtone's like for your cell phone.
There's 30 seconds of a good song in there. How long is a ringtone? 30 seconds.
I don't know, but I don't know that's a very good earmark of quality.
But
it's not a good song, but hey, you know what? It could be an excellent ringtone.
I use that just as a timestamp thing, man. Like there's a ringtone's worth of good song in this, and it's like if he had just expanded on it, it would have been better.
I mean, I'm kind of like everybody else at the table. I don't have like a whole lot of thought on this really at all, outside of like the comments we have been like putting to death. But we brought up the point about how there's bongos and stuff. They swing for the fences with ideas on this record too, with orchestras.
And in Childhood's End, he had a whole. They kind of revisited the Destroyer thing of having the child choir in there.
You see footage of Paul fucking with kids.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Whoa.
With
the kids. As in teasing,
messing with them,
messing with them.
This isn't
messing
getting better,
with
y'all.
them.
This is getting, you mean he's joking and teasing?
Joking.
Yes, there we go. Yeah, that's actually a really funny bit because you see all the kids going into like the big room where like the drums are usually
This is
set up.
getting more and more creepy.
Just wait for it.
Just
I
listen.
know what
Well, let me tell the story for folks that don't have the series. But yeah, all the kids are going in to do their big chorus bit, and they're like messing with the microphones and stuff. And you even see like the music instructor be like, "Quit touching things, quit touching," and they're still just doing it. Paul gets over the talk back and just yells, "Quit touching everything!" And like that, every kid is just like starts shrinking in their seats, like, "Oh shit!"
And meanwhile, Paul's just like, ha ha ha.
Yeah, he's like chuckling. He's like, hey.
Got your ass.
Before we get out of this, Seduction of the Innocent, that title,
That's so awkward.
it's copped from a book that was written in the 1950s that was highly critical of comic books and led to the Comic Code Authority.
Yep.
The little stamp you see on the corner.
But the song has nothing to do with any of that.
I think it was very loosely inspired by that, though.
Yeah.
But
He's
a
a
lot
comics
of,
guy,
I
too,
just think
so.
it's a interesting little side note. It's funny how 30 years later it went from comic books to the PMRC.
Yeah.
Next track is called "I Confess," and I do. I confess, I don't like it.
Co-written by Ken Tamplin, who has vocal training videos on YouTube.
I did not know that.
Yep. I remember him being made fun of on a Tosh.0 episode of all things.
Interesting. I think I've written that here on my notes. I said, ironically, has the raw material to be a decent Kiss song, or perhaps more to the point, a decent Gene song. And so that maybe makes it the best song on the album for me. But I didn't get that vibe. I wrote that off first listen. Today, I disagreed with that sentiment. I don't like it, even though I feel I don't know. If it is the best song on the album, that's not saying anything at all.
Yeah, it's kind of felt
Does
about
that
like
make
my
sense?
takes too.
Yeah.
Like it just didn't work for me.
If it was a Kiss song, it'd probably be a solid Gene song. If they really like,
Well, that's
tried
what
to,
I just said. It's the best I could go with.
I don't know. This one to me just felt lazy. Like out of all the Gene songs, like it felt like he put in an effort for once with some of these songs. This one felt like he just fell back into his.
Here's something.
I need one more, right? Fuck. It really kind of fell into that.
And we talked about the length here. It's like, was it necessary to include?
Absolutely not.
Is there are there outtakes, other songs they recorded that weren't used?
Yeah.
That means this was chosen over something else.
Yeah, there's like
how
in
bad?
fact-
How bad is the outtakes?
Well, you want to know one of the outtake songs? Within.
Interesting.
Yes, Within was recorded
That
and
makes
written
sense.
during this
That
time
makes
period.
sense. Okay, well we'll
So that's an outtake.
keep that for a future note. In the Mirror. Is this extreme? Didn't we leave them behind on Kiss My Ass?
it is kind of like the more.
Oh my God, you're right.
I didn't get an extreme vibe off of that. That's hilarious.
Well, this has some raw material to be a good Kiss song, but the approach and direction is just too fucked up sounding. It's just too modern.
Well, I was gonna say it's
Too
interesting.
much of a modern alternative rock style that they're foolishly exploring.
It's oddly up tempo, or it's oddly at a higher BPM than the rest of the record.
Yeah,
If that makes sense. It feels like a faster song than the rest of the whole record.
And who's the target audience with something like this?
Honestly, I would see a lot, and this isn't a huge slam. It's a little slam, but it's not a big one. In areas like a Gaffney, South Carolina.
in Gastonia, North Carolina.
You know what I mean, though. You could see them listen to this being like, man, this record's
Hey,
fucking
man, did you
badass.
hear that new Kiss song? A song called, it's called
In the Mirror.
In the Mirror.
Jackson,
Man.
Tennessee.
But, there's a potential here. There's a riff there that I could see being worked, again, with the original group to a different strength. And it may have been something. So the potential is just lost here.
Yeah.
It's like they're just grasping in air, grasping at whatever they can get, and
It's
working
just-
ideas because it's like that they don't know what to do or how to do it.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Just suffers the same thing as all the rest of them. That's why it's just a hard record to kind of dive into.
And I say this with love. With the last one, I'll Walk Alone. Not only is that the title, but looking at the credits, it really feels like Bruce just kind of turned to Eric and went, I want to do something.
Okay, last song, I Walk Alone. It's kind of a stupid title, and it's like a 12-year-old's notebook back page scribblings like, I walk alone.
This is what happens when you let the lead guitar player write a song.
What you trying to say, Cap?
Well, it's cool for a 12-year-old to do that.
Yeah.
It's not so cool for Kiss. This is Bruce's lead vocal debut.
Yeah.
And not a bad one.
No.
In fact, I actually prefer his vocal. I think his vocal would have served this whole album better if he sang lead on all of these songs.
I mean, imagine him doing like
Truthfully.
or at least him doing like the quiet part of Master and Slave, and then let Paul pick in for the
or
heavy chorus.
It works. So you could have given him more room, but and curiously to me, on my second listen, you know what it brought to mind to me? His vocal style, Ace.
Yeah,
a little bit.
I can hear that.
Oh,
It's and what I found myself liking best about it is it doesn't have that train. Rock and roll to me is very bass. It's for lack of a better term, vocal music. It's like, okay, you can carry melody well enough, you can be the singer.
Right.
You can do this. Oh, you can play. You know 3 or 4 chords. You can be the guitar player. Rock and roll is supposed to be accessible. That's what makes rock and roll great, and it got to this point, particularly by the 80s, and I think we've talked about this in previous episodes, where there's this snobbishness that you have to have some sort of European neoclassical music ethic that you shouldn't even approach the guitar unless you can play and it ruined rock and roll. It killed it for me. That's why all those 80s bands fucking suck, or the ones that maybe it was worse when they tried to meld the two ideas together, but when it gets to its base and it's people that are singing and doing because it's something they're passionate about, it comes from a different place. It isn't necessarily that they can play really well, but they are capable of doing great things within the confines of what they know how to do. That does not make this a good song, nor does it make it a good rock song.
No.
But it is a good, solid vocal from Bruce.
And to me,
it's a sad thing because not only is this his first lead vocal on an album, this is also at the same time his farewell track,
which makes this track very interesting.
It kind of makes it more bittersweet.
It is.
In retrospect.
My second time listening to it, I almost felt sad,
right?
Yeah.
Because all the interviews and stuff I see with Bruce, he seems like he's a solid, cool dude.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of his playing style. I'm not a fan of the way he approaches a lot of this stuff. But as a person, as an individual, see, I can separate the two. So if I say, oh, he sucks, I don't think Bruce Kulick sucks.
Yeah.
I think he's an excellent guitar player, but he's not to what I think makes good rock and roll music.
Right.
But he also seems like a really cool person. I'm not cutting on him. And ironically, for all of the things I don't like about his guitar style, is here he has a vocal style that I found myself enjoying.
On to. But yeah, it's Bruce's swan song, and here we are now in the Kiss timeline where the Bruce Kulick guitar contributions are done.
Yeah. And in a weird, so it's like they finally wrap up the record, and this is usually about the time of the show we dig into, where the tour date and how big or successful it was. But for the very first time, this record doesn't even come out.
Well, let's kind of summarize this whole thing, because these songs are long. They're all long songs. None of them are like 2.5 minute type stuff that they would have done in 1975.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the complete antithesis of a Dress to Kill. They're pretentious, which, okay, you can be pretentious if you can maybe back it up with something, of a certain intelligence. That doesn't necessarily make it good, but at least you can understand it. But what's worse, if it's interesting. Well, these aren't interesting. These are boring. And there's nothing worse.
Nothing exciting.
Than being boring.
Yeah.
And at 60 minutes, I think this is the longest album of any incarnation of the band, from what I understand. If I have it right, it's even longer than Hot in the Shade. And more boring than Hot in the Shade. Hot in the Shade.
At least there was a couple little glimmers on there.
There was nothing glimmers on Hot in the Shade. That record sucked.
But at least there's major key kind of excitement to a point.
Yeah, they were trying. I don't know.
It at least had a little more life.
But yes, this record stays shelved for a full 18 months, and it only gets released to curb the burgeoning bootleg market.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to personally get into that one.
Well, it's bootlegging on the equally burgeoning internet, which is a new, relatively pretty well a new thing for most people.
And it's like, and around this time period, I mean, we didn't even talk about it too much on the Unplugged episode, but it's like, even during that time on the internet, you were starting to get rumors and buzz saying, hey, Ace and Peter are going to be at the MTV Unplugged thing. Like, we know this is going to happen. This isn't a rumor. Like, this is going to happen. They're just not talking about it.
See, I didn't know that.
So that even got out there to the public about a month or two before it actually happened.
That also goes to show how limited the influence the internet had. I guess if people had it, they knew. I didn't know about it until I read about it in a magazine.
So crazy how the internet's changed from even then.
Yeah.
So around the same time period, after MTV Unplugged, the rumors started circulating that, there's probably going to be a reunion. At the same time, rumors of a new Kiss record is also going to be happening with Bruce and Eric. So the community that's online and kind of knows about it have already heard that this is coming. Gene has kind of discussed it a little bit in interviews. And then all of a sudden the reunion happens, which we'll get into in the next episode, but this is still connected to Carnival of Souls. So the reunion happens, and the record just never gets discussed.
Don't they show some mock-up of the album cover on the Kiss My Ass? So that's 2 years before that album even gets recorded? That's really bizarre.
So they were already kind of working up the ideas, because originally the record was going to be called Head. Yeah, and it kind of had that weird gimp mask.
Well, they also had the name... maybe Seduction of the Innocent also considered for an album title?
Possibly.
I can't remember. I saw there was a number of different album titles.
So around the same, like in the middle of the reunion tour, like the guys are already back on the road. All of a sudden, a cassette tape copy leak starts making its way around the collector's market, not online.
Is this during the reunion tour?
During the reunion tour, a cassette tape copy starts making its way through the bootleg community. No one really knows where it came from, and this is purely speculation. But there are interviews with Eric Singer around 1999.
I've got a quote here.
Go ahead.
Eric was asked if the album would ever see proper release, and he said, "Oh yeah, the album's in the can," and then bitterly added, "The garbage can." He was not real happy about this reunion business.
And I say that
he lost his job, so I can see being upset, but he can't be so ignorant as to not realize that was going to happen.
Well, here's my thing. This is why I actually did not mention Eric at all when we were talking about the way they felt during this time. That's why I mentioned Bruce was kind of feeling his way into it. I intentionally didn't mention Eric because I find it very interesting that Bruce was in the band longer. He finally was a little bit more comfortable with it, but has talked about in interviews since then, he's like, it hurt, but I was just happy to see the band, back together. I wanted to see that lineup play. So, I just, I enjoyed my time with the band, but it was time for it to be done, yada, yada. Eric seemed to have kind of taken it personally when he really is the session guy. He's the guy that pops in, plays with the band for about 3 to 4 years, dips and is on to the next thing.
Yeah, it's been his whole career.
He oddly took this one personal enough to potentially, don't know for sure, but potentially have leaked the record himself.
Well, and
what this is his first big
you have
gig?
to also wonder what the Gene and Paul were telling them.
Yeah.
What's going on? Probably not going to. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
They might have felt like they were lied to.
Maybe.
And who knows? We weren't a part of that process. I don't like to get into that kind of stuff.
No, but I just found the bootleg thing really interesting because, again, it was going to be a weird anomaly of a Kiss record that was potentially always shelved.
But there was no song titles attached to it. Didn't the song titles sort of kind of become kind of fan assigned?
Yeah, just a bit. It was just track 1, track 2. Like, they were able to kind of denote some of them. Like, they already called hate because that was just the first word that he said. And I think they were able to kind of connect the dots with some other interviews from Gene and Paul kind of discussing song titles. They're like, oh, well, that must be this. But no, there was a lot of discrepancies in it. And there was also some stuff that didn't show up on the record. Stuff like weird outro, like instrumental outros that didn't show up later to like the box set and things like that. So the tape actually had some interesting, cool things until the Kiss box set came out.
Well,
and it's all interesting for, by the time we're recording this, as a little side note, it was the first Kiss record, a full Kiss record, to be leaked in the middle of a whole bunch of YouTube leaks that are happening right now that is satisfying the 70s and us while we're having to deal with the 90s. It's just oddly poetic.
Right.
Come on, we're a Kiss podcast. We have to mention the fact it's even happening. We're not going to dedicate an episode on it, but wow, holy shit, that's cool.
Yeah, it is cool.
It's really
as we
cool.
record this, and as any Kiss fan knows, there is a giant dump of unreleased and unseen Kiss videos being uploaded to YouTube. The hows and whys behind it are being hotly debated,
and we won't discuss it here.
I have no interest in the drama behind it.
But we're just enjoying the fruits.
We're enjoying the fruit
daily.
Finally, this album is quietly released with no fanfare or promotion whatsoever.
I think they made like one magazine. I've seen one ad,
and it was released on October 28th, 1997, and surprisingly, it peaked as high as number 27.
Oh wow!
I wonder if people were just buying it off the idea of the reunion.
That is your Kiss Army fan base. I say they don't care about their fans, but their fans are going to come out. They're going to buy it. It's going to push it real high. They always peak at a certain point straight away, very
and then
quick,
immediately dip,
and then immediately disappears, which is exactly what this does. And it disappears into obscurity, having not sold 200,000 copies, which now would be a reason to celebrate.
Yeah.
Which is ironic, but this album, again, it's the most anomalous record. It's a bizarre record, and not just because it was their attempt at trying to do a modern grunge rock thing or whatever you want to call it, but it was also done at a time when they were working towards another end. They were clearly moving towards the inevitable reunion tour of the original band, which of course is the reason for all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just interesting to go back and reflect on something that just never seemed to... it was never really meant to be in a weird way.
Yeah.
And I have one interesting last little PS to all this, and it's what initially sent me down this path of trying to figure out what this record was all about. Fast forwarding a couple years, Kiss did a online video game. It was kind of like a point and click adventure where you could choose your own path.
Mm-hmm.
At the very end of the game, you heard Master and Slave.
But this was with the makeup characters.
With the makeup characters. It was just an end title screen showing credits. But you heard the riff. The riff was being played.
Was that before the album came out?
After the album came out.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean...
So it's interesting that the only time any content from this album was ever used... It was for an end title screen
on a video
game they released after the reunion.
Weird.
That is very weird. So yeah, the only time it was ever used.
Well, we keep talking about the reunion. We keep saying reunion. And of course, it's no secret or surprise to anyone that this reunion occurs. And we're going to go into greater detail about that on the next episode. And we'll get into the hows and whys.
Yeah, because folks, this was only 3 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was only 3 months.
This is all being planned and put together as they were recording this album.
Yeah.
And of course, again, this album doesn't get released until another year and a half later.
Yeah.
there's a lot that goes on, and we'll talk about all of the lot that is going on on the next episode of No Time to Turn.
Thank you for listening. Please insert another coin by supporting the show for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/somethinggoodnetwork.